Hey, family. Welcome to part one of today's episode. Yes, this journey is wild. So there's a part one and a part two. Sit back, put your seatbelts on, and enjoy.
Safe space, we ain't never give a reason you should hide. Compile all your questions, we're taking the quest. Join Tarsha on this journey to discover the rest. Go.
Welcome to the Adoption Journey Podcast. I am your host, Tarsha Smith, and welcome to another journey. Before we get started, I want to remind you guys to please go to Patreon and become a supporter. All things mind, body, and soul. You're going to get the extreme hip hop class, fun stuff from the podcast, as well as plant-based recipes, all things Tarsha. But, all right. So without further ado, you know how we do here at the Adoption Journey Podcast. I have a fellow adoptee by the name of Sharon. Hi, Sharon.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well. Thank you so much
Good.
for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I am going to dive right in.
Okay.
All right.
I got my waders on.
Okay. So my very first question that I always love to ask is, how old were you when you found out that you were adopted?
53.
Girl, stop.
Just 5 years ago. Just 5 years ago. Uh-huh.
Yeah, my mouth is wide open because I wasn't ready. Okay, let me close because I wasn't ready.
Yes, just
Okay.
5 years ago.
Take me all the way back to the beginning.
Well, that's the actual number of confirmation. I had clues all along the way, all through my life,
Yeah.
that things didn't add up. And I had asked. I had found some documents that had led me to believe that I was adopted, and I had asked, and I was told no, that's not what I was looking at, and that my parents are very faith-filled people, and so there's a biblical story on how I came to be with my parents, and my mom really followed televangelists, the Rex Humbarts, the Jimmy Bakers, the Jimmy Swaggarts, all of those. And so we had went to see one of the televangelists in Ann Arbor, and she had always told the testimony of how she had stayed in line for over 2 hours waiting to speak to this pastor, and her heart's desires were, at that time she was not married, that she wanted to get married. She wanted to have actually in the order, she needed a car, she wanted a house, and she wanted a child. And when she finally arrived up at that pulpit, that pastor had told her if she sowed a seed, of course, that's what the pastor said, if she sowed a seed, that she would have all of these things within 2 years. And she did. And so all through my life, that was my biblical testimony on how I came to be. And my mother was 40 at that time, and my father was 46. So yes, it was divine intervention for her to have been able to have this child at 40. I was too naive to not do the math and add it all up myself. But yes, so that was my birth story, and that was my only birth story. My mother never told me anything about pregnancies and the feelings and how they got ready and how they got prepared. Those things were never a part of my life. That was my birth story.
Sharon, I wasn't ready for you to just dive on in like that. I still haven't closed my mouth yet. I'm still
Yes. So that's how I came to be. That's the story on how I came to be.
Okay, so growing up, how were you as a kid? Did you feel out of place, or were you just a regular, just living life?
Well,
in hindsight, of course.
Yes. I mean, if you ask me my life story, I had an amazing life.
Mm-hmm.
My parents were business owners. They owned more than one business. They were, we weren't wealthy by any means, but in a child's eyes, we weren't struggling. Look,
Right.
I didn't know the struggles that my parents had to do to make house payment and all those things. So in my child's eye, we weren't struggling.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Catholic school. I'd always gone to a private school. We lived in a subdivision that had a golf course and tennis courts, and I always went to camps and boarding schools, and we had timeshares. So I grew up not the average little black girl who was born in Detroit,
Right.
and far from the life that my cousins were living.
Mm.
So that was always very obvious to me as well, that we were so far removed from the lives that my parents grew up with. And so even though, we had some financial means, most families, close-knit families, don't stray that far apart. So all of my first cousins were old enough to be my aunts and uncles, and so I looked at them as aunties. And
Mm-hmm.
so going to Detroit and visiting them and everything, my brother and I were always labeled as the spoiled grandchildren, the grandchildren that got everything. So although we were very well loved and we were kind of carried around like the baby dolls for all of our first cousins because we were so much younger than our first cousins, it
Mm-hmm.
was always a separation that was clear in the way that they talked about us or the way that they labeled us or associated with us. So we knew we're different.
Right.
We're a little bit different. We live in a different place. We're in a different culture. We go to a different school. We're in a different community. So that was always known. That was always a given. The relationship with my parents, the relationship with my father was amazing from the very first memory to the day he died.
Mm.
My father was a fairy tale father. There is no television dad that topped my father. And when I say my dad was the type that bought me a little fur coat and said, if no man ever buys you a fur coat, daddy bought you a fur coat.
That's right.
Daddy was the one that would bring me a dozen roses when he would bring mom a dozen roses. Daddy never left the house without saying, I love you. Daddy labeled everything he bought. This is for you. This is for your brother. This is for my son-in-law. This is for my grandchild, because everything I have, I'm getting it for you. So the relationship with my father was absolutely amazing, and I was very much a daddy's girl.
Oh.
The relationship with my mother, I've always felt like she was always mad at me that daddy loved me or that I loved daddy.
Okay, let
So
me ask you a quick question. You mentioned your brother. Was he also adopted?
yes, I did find out that my brother was also adopted.
Okay,
At the same time I found out I was adopted,
that you were
I found out
adopted,
that both of us were adopted and neither of us
and
knew.
neither one of you knew.
Correct.
And so I wonder, you felt like your mom was mad at you because your dad
Well, she would,
loved you.
she
Like,
would always say things. She would make little comments like, if your daddy only knew the real you. Oh, you got your daddy wrapped around your finger. If he only knew what
and
you were
most little girls
capable
do.
of.
And most little
you know.
girls do. Daddy's girl.
So
Most little girls
yeah,
do.
so in a lot of ways, I felt like mom was such a Jekyll and Hyde. She was one way in
Mm,
front of daddy, very loving, very doting, very loving and doting out in the community. My mom was the PTA mom, the Girl Scout mom, the Boy Scout mom, the brownies at school. But at home, she was a different person. At home, there were things said that made me always feel like she just genuinely did not like me. She
mm.
didn't like me as a person. I never felt like my mom even liked me. Um,
Wow.
and that's a feeling that never
Yeah.
changed.
Tell me, you said earlier that there were little things that, what were those things that, you saw, but am I? Maybe not. What were some of
Well,
those things?
okay, I put it this way. There was one big thing. There was one big thing. Um, living in a subdivision in the 70s is very much like that 70s show. There's a lot of stuff going on in a subdivision, and in a subdivision of people who are coming from different backgrounds than you.
Mm-hmm.
So I seen and was exposed to a lot of things that I probably would not have been exposed to. Like I babysat for a couple that were swingers. I didn't know that they were swinging. All I
Okay.
knew that Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so went to Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so's house every night and we babysat all their kids. And, you know, um, and it's Ann Arbor. And so those type of things. Um, so when I would share things with my mother, because
Mm-hmm.
she was my primary caretaker, um, it was never believed. I was always accused of um, snooping, of lying, of trying to maliciously destroy other people's lives. I know what you're capable of. That's what's in you. So I um, very early in my life, 10 to 12, developed the mindset that she does not think much of my character. Not that I even knew what the word character was,
Mm-hmm.
it was the feeling of my character. So I went above and beyond to be everything she accused me of. I made sure I was never any of those things. I
Mm-hmm.
never lied. I never stayed out late. I never went somewhere where I wasn't supposed to go. And in my over the top trying to please her, I really went through a lot of emotional and physical issues that were taking its toll. Um, really trying to be the perfect kid to get her to like me.
Mm.
So I
That's
developed it.
yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I developed an eating disorder very early on.
There
Bulimia
it
was a
is.
big thing. Um, I did not become bulimic out of I'll put it this way. At the time, I didn't think it was an emotional issue. I thought it was, mommy keeps saying I'm chubby. Mommy keeps saying I'm fat. Mommy says I'm bigger than the other kids. I can't eat, but I'm hungry, but I don't want her to see me eat. So I was doing that.
Mm.
That was taking a physical toll on me. So I was always
How
having
old were
kidney
you when you
problems.
started doing that?
About 11.
Oh, really young.
About 11. Yeah. Um, I had tried to take my life, um, between 12 and 13. And subsequently around that time, I also was experiencing some sexual abuse by the hands of a neighbor whose father was a local pastor who my mother found very highly esteemed. And it was very clear when I
Mm-hmm.
did tell, that I was not going to be believed, that I was enticing this, that I was encouraging this, that I was not going to destroy this family, that I was not believed. And subsequently, she called the police on me. She wanted
To say what? What do you?
to to scare me into not lying. The police questioning lineup was along the lines of, you can't make false reports. You can't make false allegations. This is going to ruin your family. Everyone in
Wow.
the subdivision is going to know. And so I shut down
Yeah.
and not verbally said the words, but in my heart of hearts, that my dog just did something downstairs.
Uh-oh.
In my heart of hearts, I knew that was what broke me, and she was no longer in my heart my mom anymore. I I
Wow.
was I knew at 13 it was up to me and it was up to God.
Do you happen to know, did your brother experience those same types of feelings towards her, or was their relationship different because it's a mommy-son
No,
relationship?
well, now as I look back and I look for back to how we started, I was 18 months when my parents got me.
Okay.
And very quickly, they were they had informed the adoption agency that they wanted a son. But there was that 1 year waiting period that you're supposed to have while you're still fostering. Well, my brother was born and was immediately relinquished upon birth, and they needed an immediate placement for him. So in less than 2 months of me entering their home, there was a new baby boy.
Oh, that's a lot.
So my honeymoon period of
sure.
getting to know my parents and getting adjusted was taken over, and she very quickly became obsessed with the new baby.
The new baby.
So my brother and I were raised as only children in the same household. We never interacted. We didn't really play with each other. We weren't taught to like each other. In many ways, we were encouraged to stay away from each other. Even all through high school, we went to a relatively small high school, 300 kids.
Oh, that's
and
small.
only 13 of them were Black. There were students who never knew that he and I were brother and sister because we did not interact or engage with each other at
what
all.
does that look like in the house, especially when you have two children that are very close in age?
It looks like a lot of rivalry, a lot of competition, a lot of anger towards each other, a lot of hurt towards each other. I was always with Daddy.
Yeah.
Whenever, if I would cry and I would grab onto his leg. If he could take me, I went. If it wasn't going to work, I went. And my brother was left at home with my mom. And I thought that that's where he wanted to be. And I thought that's who she wanted to be with.
Yeah.
And now as we're adults and we're closer now than we ever were before, I now know that that was not the best life for him. That was not the best life for him either. But the incident that occurred was my parents ran adult foster care homes, and we took care of developmentally disabled men. And so by this time we had moved to a suburb of Ann Arbor, and we had a huge country farm home, 8 bedrooms, 2 kitchens, we'd walk up one side of the house, walk down the other side of the house. And so the home was divided so that we had the care home where the residents lived, and we had our family's home.
Okay.
But all of the office supplies were in our part of the home. So I acted very much like, an employee, at a very young age, at 15, 16. And there was one day, if you've ever had a filing cabinet that the brackets are misplaced and you have to pull the tray all the way out and take that bracket out to get everything back in. Well, there was a binder in there and it was misplaced, and I pulled it out because I'm thinking it was for one of the consumers. And I needed to know whose it was and where it needed to go. It was not my intention to snoop or pry. Right. I was trying to put it back. Yeah. So we took care of all men. So I opened up this binder, and here's the name, Sharon. At that time, something. Did not clue in on it. Did not pay attention to it. I looked. I saw the name. It was a birth certificate, and it was in the order of adoption. I did not know what an order of adoption was. All that was through my mind was, we have all men, so I don't know who this person is, so I don't know where this goes. And so I brought it to my mom, and I asked her, who is this? Where does this go? And when I say that I still hear the slap in my head, I still feel the teeth hit.
Yeah.
When that hand contacted my jaw, and it was such a violent slap that I didn't even feel pain. It was, what just happened?
Right, for sure.
What did I do that I will never do again? I don't know what just happened. I don't know who this is. I'm not asking any questions. Whatever it is, it's bad. And, she went through the, you're snooping. You shouldn't be going through things that you shouldn't be going through. That's nothing. You don't have anything to do with that. My brother had witnessed this,
Yeah.
and he immediately started joking that that's you. I knew they found you behind the garbage can. I knew you were adopted. Because we were always
Yeah, yeah.
nitpicky with
So
each
that
other.
was,
So
yeah, that
that
was
was his
ammunition for him.
excuse.
Yeah.
Yes, that was his excuse to finally put a label on it that he's the true son and I was left at the garbage can. And so he went to school and told all of his friends. We found out my sister was adopted.
Oh my God.
And I was devastated.
Yeah.
I head hung, dodging people, and didn't know how to answer it and didn't know how to handle it. So I put it in a emotional box, put the
I
lid
want
on
to
it.
ask you a question because you're very close to your dad. So when incidents would happen, were you able to at least talk to your dad?
By that age, I had learned not to tell on mom
Got it.
because although my father was very comforting and very encouraging, and he always encouraged me to talk to him, and he always, baby girl, whatever you need, you can always talk to me. And he would actually say things like, well, your mom has some issues, or your mom's under stress, or your mom's, she really does love you. She's doing the best she can. And although he would say those words and they were supposed to have been words of comfort, they also were words that were going, well, okay.
Well, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, what's really
Why does
happening?
why does
Yeah.
daddy why does he have to sugarcoat mom's behavior so much? So and if she thought that I had told something, it would have just been worse. When I saw the movie Mommy Dearest, when that movie came out, there was such a deep sense of relief knowing that there was somebody else out there like me. There was somebody else that had been told the words, you treat me like a common dog on the street.
Yeah,
That
she
there
did
was
tell her that.
somebody else out there that had
She said,
been,
why do you want to embarrass me?
yes,
And yeah, it was all about her.
oh
Yeah.
that whole line, I just sat there going, amazing. That scene in the closet with all of her clothes being strewn up.
Every time I see a wire hanger, I think about those scenes.
I could recite. I watched that movie
Me
so many
too.
times
I did too.
because it was me. Christina Crawford was me.
Wow.
And I think that was the
Do you know
first.
how powerful that is? If for anybody that doesn't know, go the movie Mommy Dearest.
Yes.
It's the name of a movie.
Yeah. And I did like a mental book report trying to figure out, oh, she's adopted. And then I was like, oh, okay. But never was I going to question. I was not going to question them. They said I was not. They had their story, they had their journey, they had their testimony, and I was not going to question this. I don't question my parents.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think that's because they felt disrespected, your mother? If you question me, you're being disrespectful.
I think it's a combination of a couple of things. First of all, it was the time. It was children should speak when they're spoken to.
Yeah.
Children should stay out of grown folks' business.
Yeah.
Children should be out of sight. So there was that aspect, which is very much a Black family umbrella. We all heard that.
Yeah.
And then there was also the Catholic school, guilty. Everything is a sin. Everything is a guilt, and you need penance. And everything you do, you've got to bare your soul, expose yourself, and purge yourself of these sins, or you're going to hell. Everything you do, you're going to hell.
Listen, I need to know, as you grow up, did you go to college? Did you leave the house and go to college? Is that the route that you took? And if that's the route that you took and you left from under their roof, how are you managing the world now that you're outside of this world?
Okay. So, yes, I completed high school, and it was my intention to go to Michigan State University. and I had no assistance with applying for school or things like that. It was something that was not even in their mindset to assist me with. So
Okay.
I did the best that I could and didn't get some things right. So subsequently, I wasn't able to start at MSU when I wanted to.
Okay.
So my parents encouraged me to go to the community college because I could get a Pell Grant. You could go without cost, and everything was about cost. And my parents made sure that I knew what everything cost. You know, we've just sent you to these private schools. Now you're on your own. So I went to Jackson Community College first, and that year I was still living at home. So that year didn't feel very much different than high school.
Right.
I was still with the same community people. I was still seeing people that a good majority of them had gone to either my school or the local school, and I knew them through friend sets. And so it was very comfortable, and it was very much playtime. First year in school was playtime. I think we spent more time majoring in spades than we did class.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Okay, we were skipping classes because the Uno game was thick.
Yes, I listen. Yes, freshman year is always
Yes.
My
Okay.
transcripts from my freshman year.
Yes. And I had joined the Black Students Coalition, so I was with more African American students than I'd ever been with in my life. So I was in. I was the girl. I was living my best life. Not really going to class.
You're not going to class at all.
No. But I also had that fear factor. My parents are going to kill me
when they see my grades.
So,
right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. So I would drop out of classes and proctor classes so that I wouldn't have report cards when I go to school every day. But I knew that couldn't last. So once I had done my my basic classes, my 101 classes, and I was able to go to Michigan State the next year, my first year in school at Jackson College, I had met my husband. I had met a man who was a little bit older. And he was 6 years older, so he was 24. I'm 18, and so, and he's very much an old soul. So he was the one that was saying, "Oh no, you're not gonna stay here with these chicken heads in school. You need to get going. You need to go." And you know, and at the same time, my parents are not saying anything about how I'm going to pay for MSU. I'm thinking I'm applying for grants. I'm applying for loans. I'm applying for work studies.
Yeah.
And it very quickly became, my husband became a person in my life that he's like, no, I'm going to invest in you. And before we were married, it was a conscious investment in me. And I'd never had anybody invest in me. So he was, no, you're going to school. No, you're going to do this. No, you're not hanging with this crew. No, I'm calling you every day. You're going to be in school.
So,
if I have to be up there, you're going to be in school.
Your parents they just know you enrolled, but they're not questioning how is this getting paid for?
My parents moved me up there. They paid for I was dual enrolled. I went to the Lansing Community College and MSU because I went into a corrections program that had a pilot program that merged both schools. Okay. So I was able to live off campus. But living off campus means you have rent and an apartment.
Right.
Luckily, a high school classmate of mine had already acquired the apartment and she was looking for roommates. So my parents did move me up there. They did pay for the first month's rent. They paid for the first semester of tuition, and that was
it.
That was it.
Okay.
And let me say, they never said that they wouldn't pay, but they never offered or said, where's your bill? Where's your tuition? How much is tuition? What classes are you taking? They never said those things. So here I go, that girl who does not want to make waves, who does not want to ripple feathers because y'all really don't like me a whole lot anyway. I figured that their investment in me is over by this point. They just never, I worked myself through, and my husband literally was helping me pay for college before we were even married.
Wow.
But my I consider that my first year of school, because that's really when I buckled down. And yes, I did not handle life that year. I really had a serious breakdown. I had a serious acknowledgement of I didn't know who I was as a person. I didn't know who I wanted to be. I had never had those talks with my parents. You know, I have 5 children now, so I'm constantly, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be today?
Right, right,
You know, what do
right.
you want to be now? How will we get there? What is your journey? And my parents never, I felt like they never really had time to discuss that because they were always running their business.
And I think it's your statement of, I didn't know me. How many adoptees feel like that? Like, you get out in this world and you're like, okay, who am I? Regardless if you know or not.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is, but that sense of, oh my
Yeah.
God, who is this
Well, and I
girl?
felt like I
Who
knew
am I?
even less than most other young people because I had these feelings like there's something wrong with my story.
And you
Like I,
probably knew even less too because of how you were raised.
exactly.
You,
I knew how to conform to my parents' ideals of me.
right.
I did not know how to be my own
Be
individual
my own
person in the
individual
life, right, where people
girl.
were now
Yeah.
judging me as an adult.
Right. Because they don't know
Mhm.
what's happening
Right,
at the house. We just
right.
see you
Yes.
as you are today.
So I went to school and I went to bed. I went to school and bed, school and bed. I'd get up in the morning, I'd go to class, and luckily, God placed in my life a professor of my psych class that was also a counselor who just saw me, just saw it. And, you know, it was back that lean on me type of thing in school where the professor would, you know, ask you to hang around after school and just really ask you, well, what's going on? Well, you know, what are you taking? Well, why did you decide that? You know, and coincidentally, I started school in veterinary med because I had figured out that I could get a scholarship being a Black female who was raised in the country to go into veterinary med because
Okay.
that's not an area that Black females go
No, it is
into.
not.
So I had a scholarship to go into veterinary med.
Okay.
And I had figured that out. And my, our local veterinarian who took care of our farm animals, had proctored me and had signed off and he was my mentor. So school was being paid for. And I was going to school because I had to keep grades up for that scholarship.
Right.
But I was coming home and getting in the bed.
Depressed.
That was it. That was my life.
It.
I didn't go, I did not attend school functions. I never went to an MSU football game. I never went to an MSU basketball game. I never went to any of the campus parties. I'd hear about them. I'd see them. I'd hear the actor stories and everything. I did not want people, I didn't want people to see me. I didn't want people to discover the real me. And the real me didn't know who she was.
So how do we get to the point where you began to unravel your story?
Well, by my second year of college, my husband and I had decided to get married, and which is it was no big romantic story. It was one of those, you're my best friend, I'm your best friend. Do you want to date anymore? Nope, I don't want to date anymore. Do you want to? Nope, I'm satisfied with you. We will be best friends forever, and best friends will make the best husband and wife. You want to get married? Sure. Do you want to get married? Sure. Okay, here's the date.
And there it is.
So we formed a partnership.
Okay.
Because this person that's a little bit older than me, who is business minded, who is a military brat, who has an awesome family foundation, and who has an amazing father and an amazing mother, was just guiding me through life. And so we got married. We had our daughter, and I was going through life. My mother it never occurred to her to assist with a wedding or say, that was never a
I
conversation that I
was
ever had
literally
with my
just getting
mom.
ready to ask you
Never a
that.
conversation. Oh my God, I had my daughter's wedding planned when she was 12. My mother never ever discussed a
Well, did
wedding
she
with me.
attend at least? Was she
No,
there?
so here's the story of that. We
Uh-oh.
had a wedding planned, and unfortunately, my father-in-law passed away. We were expecting to get married February 14th of 86.
Mm-hmm.
My father-in-law passed away February 11th,
Oh,
and
okay.
we canceled the wedding because it just wasn't appropriate to do that. And I soon after found out that I was pregnant, and I was like, okay, I'm not walking down the aisle with a baby bump. And so we waited until after my daughter was born to get married. So then I had shamed my mother. So then she was not paying for a wedding. I didn't deserve a wedding. You're already shacking up. You've already had a baby. You've already done this and that. So y'all go ahead and do what you want to do. So we got married at the courthouse, and we still invited lots of friends and family. And of course, I wanted my father there.
Mm-hmm.
And we were there. It was a snowstorm that day. People were sliding off the roads to get there. It was dangerous. But I was like, we're not turning back. We're doing this today. And we got there, and I'm waiting, and our time slot was passing away. At the courthouse, you got a
Yeah. You
time
had the time
slot.
slot,
You got to
right?
get married they said 2:00.
Right.
And my dad was not there. And so I was worrying, did something happen? Were the roads too treacherous? And my mom showed up, and I was so disappointed. I don't want to say she was the last person I wanted to see there, but she was the last person I wanted to see there. And I was so disappointed that my dad wasn't there. And I asked her, where's Daddy? He had to work. My parents had employees. They went everywhere that they wanted to go. You did not schedule staff on this day?
Okay. Oh,
Huh.
yeah. So at what point, so you get married and you have your kids, when do you, because I know you just found out just recently, but what changed in the air that
Well,
made you say, okay?
when my
And let
daughter
me
was
ask you this
born,
too. Hold on, I have a second,
yeah,
part two to that question. Were both of your parents already gone by the time you got your answers?
no,
Girl,
no.
do tell.
Okay. So my mother never came to the birth of my children. That was not important. She showed up for my daughters. She came with my husband to pick me up. My daughter was jaundiced, so she stayed a few extra days. So she did come like on day 4 to pick us up. And she did bond with my daughter incredibly. She loved that baby girl. And I was thinking, yes, this is what's going
Yeah.
to bring us together. This is the piece that are going to finally make us mother and daughter. And we will finally have 3 generations. And actually, my grandmother lived with my mom. We will have 4
4
generations
generations.
that my daughter will be able to grow up with and see. And my mom was awesome with my daughter. And then it took 6 years to have my son. And I was thinking, she'll be awesome with this grandchild also. She only has 1, and here's number 2. My parents are up in age. They're in their 70s at this point. Nope, she didn't show up for his birth at all. And he never, Daddy loved him to death because that's his little boy. That's his little man. That's tractors and horses and pony rides and all of that. Mom just was like, yeah, you can come pick him up. I'll take the other one. So that bothered me, and it bothered my son, and he was raised being bothered by it. And she set a different set of rules and standards for him. As we were growing up, she just didn't treat him as nicely or showered him with the love and attention that she did my daughter. And my son felt that, and I felt that for him. And it always bothered me. My father passed away in 99, which was devastating to me. And we lived, we had our own home. We lived in the city. She still lived out in the country. But once again, Catholic schoolgirl kicked in, dutiful daughter kicked in, and we packed up our house and we moved back to the home that I grew up in. My mom had a small bungalow house next door by then. She had retired. The care home was no longer operating. And we had this huge, big country farmhouse that had all the space in the world for my kids. And we moved back because I thought Mom needed us. I thought she would be different because she needed us. And that was 10 wasted years. We stayed 10 years as her next door neighbor. We might as well have been that.
It was a reality, or excuse me, a fairy tale that you had put in your head that we're going to do this because it's going to be different, and and then it was none of that.
It was none of that. I thought out of her grief, she would soften. I thought having her grandchildren, watching them play in the yard, that she would soften. And actually, it became even worse. Because like I mentioned, that my father named everything, if he bought a new tool and it was an expensive tool, he'd call my husband, son, I just bought this and I paid this for it. And I want you to make sure you hang on to this. Don't let your mother-in-law sell it because she has no idea the value of it. Okay. When my father passed away, before we had moved there, my mom had a barn sale and sold all my father's belongings without ever telling us, and sold it for pennies on the dollar because she had no concept of what my father was a journeyman. My father was a master electrician. My father was a general contractor and a builder. So we had a pole barn full of supplies. If you wanted to be a plumber, he had the whole plumber's kit. If you wanted to be an electrician, he had the whole electrician's kit. And my husband was, like, oh, I have every tool. We happened to come out there and she's having a barn sale. I didn't get even a tie tack that belonged to my dad. My husband got a test tool that basically, I have to say, he stole out of a garage sale because we got there late. And he was like, oh my God, this means something to me and this means something to your dad. I'm taking it. And I said, take it.
Right.
Go ahead and take it. My brother, he got a couple of hunting jackets and he got a couple of rifles, but that's it. There was no regard to what we had thought and what we had been raised to be our legacy.
Yeah.
Her story was that, well, it's all mine. It's mine to do with what I want. You don't deserve it. Why would I give it to you? What? We earned it. We worked for it. It's ours. So being constantly told once again, as a mature woman who has your grandchildren, that I did not deserve any of these things, hit home very hard. We had 40 acres. We grew up walking that land, picturing where we were going to build our houses and how much land Daddy was giving me, how much land Daddy was giving my brother. And all of that was taken away because we didn't deserve it in her eyes. We weren't due it in her eyes. And finally we said, okay, we have ruined our children's childhood by making them stay out here in the country and doing, I'll put it this way. When my son graduated, country kids, we have bonfires. Yeah. Okay. So classmates everywhere. There was probably 75, 80 kids out there having an amazing bonfire. And we had his late in the summer. So it's 4th of July. We're doing fireworks. The kids are having a ball. They're having a ball. 10 o'clock came. My mother decided it was time to shut the party down. And she called the police and the fire department.
Oh, girl.
Cleared everybody out. Everybody go home. Party is over.
So what? It was going on in my head though as you're telling these stories, but that incident when you found that paper is still in the back of my mind. So it had to be in the back of your mind.
It was not.
It wasn't?
It was not. They said
They said
they're
you
my
weren't.
mom. They said
They said, you're
I'm
right.
your dad.
You're
I
right.
knew my entire life that mom was different, that mom had some emotional issues, that mom was maybe bipolar, that mom was maybe, I'm even bordering on, I thought maybe she was schizophrenic. I'm like, because you see things and hear things that I didn't do or say. I had all these things in my head that mom
Yeah.
has problems, but she's my mom. And I just have to deal with these problems. I have to live this life because she is my mom. Never, ever again did I ever question that document. I never forgot it, but it wasn't me. It was a name on a piece of paper. It was never me. So as I'm growing, as I'm getting older and life is taking over and you become more mature and you have medical appointments and things start to hurt that never hurt before and
Right.
things like that. And now,
Perimenopause shows up.
yeah,
I'm
well, yeah.
sorry.
And, and so, like I said, all of my first cousins, they're now up in age.
Right, because you're so much older.
They're
Right.
all, yeah, they're all 50s and 60s and even older. And and cancer is happening to so many of them.
Mm-hmm.
And ovarian cancer and uteral cancer and fibroids and all of these different things. And I did suffer with fibroids and breast cancers and lymph nodes and all of these different things. So as I'm hearing cousin after cousin after cousin have all of these problems, and I start to tell my doctor and I start to check different boxes when you do your family history, because my grandmother had this and my auntie had this, and yes, and you're doing all of the check boxes. And it turned out that was at the time where Angelina had that breast reduction because she was predisposition to having breast cancer. And so it was a big, huge
I
thing
remember
that
that.
she had the mastectomy to prevent having breast cancer. And I brought that up to my doctor. I am predispositioned to so many things. What do you think about that? And he readily agreed. Of course, you've got so many genetic markers and so many doctor consults and so many family members that have these things. I brought it up. I made the decision, I don't want to die early. I don't want to leave my kids. I want to live a long, healthy life. And what can I do to do that? I'll do whatever I need to do to prolong my life. I adored my kids. I was never going to treat my kids like mom and dad treated me. So I wanted to be here forever. And because it was an elective surgery, I was able to kind of finagle the medical procedure so that it was so I ended up having a breast reduction with a unilateral mastectomy to have the side that had a tumor in it removed and then have it reconstructed. So I was getting the best of both worlds. Not only were I getting my 42 Fs reduced, was preventing breast cancer
Off of
because
family medical history that wasn't even yours.
it was that day. It was that day because I had checked those boxes.
You had checked
I had
those
been checking those
boxes.
boxes. I had been checking those boxes since before my daughter was born.
And was your mom still here when you had this surgery?
Yes, she was.
So she's aware.
Yes, she was.
And what your
My
determining
mom
factors
was
were.
aware of a good majority of my medical history. One of the things that when I was in grade school, I used to go to therapy after school. And because we didn't qualify for free therapy and everything, my parents paid for this. They paid for these therapy sessions. In these therapy sessions, I would talk about separation anxiety. I would talk about being afraid to leave my parents. I would talk about not measuring up to my parents. I would talk about disappointing my parents. I would talk about having dreams that I was being taken or left or abandoned. I had those dreams, and I had those dreams on a regular basis
Wow.
to the point that they were night terrors. And I had night terrors throughout my adult history. My mother paid for these. My parents sat in waiting room while I had these therapy sessions.
Just mind boggled at the amount of things. And now you're talking about medical things.
Mm-hmm.
And still nobody said
yes
anything.
My mother knew that I was having this breast reduction and this unilateral removal. She knew. She didn't come. She wasn't there to support me, but she knew that I was having it,
right.
And she knew why I was having it.
Still nothing.
No.
If there was ever a time to say something, that was it. That was the time. Before you go and have these surgeries, there's something you need to know.
Yeah.
You have to tell me how. How did you find out?
Well, we're advanced forward, and I had 2 birth children. My husband had a son already, so my first baby was my stepson.
Mm-hmm.
He was 2 when I married his husband, my husband. Then we had our daughter, and then 6 years later we had my son. There was something that I always did when I was a little girl. I always adopted dollies. strangest little phenomenon playing. I have all my little black babies. I'd sit them at the table. I'd play tea parties, and then I would get my white baby dolls and bring them in, and they would be their sister. And I would say, yes, you're white, but you're sisters. And in my subconscious child mind, I was always adopting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So as growing up, it was something that I had casually mentioned to my husband. I'd like to adopt one day. I'd like to add a child to our amazing life. Because I thought I was super mom. I thought I was doing everything right and perfect. So we wanted to bring another child into this. And so we adopted a little girl. And subsequently she came as a package deal because little did we know she had a brother. And before her adoption was final, we were approached about adopting the sibling pair. We had already had her 2 years. We were not willing to lose her. And so we adopted both children. And he basically came to us sight unseen. Within 24 hours, he was on our doorsteps. He was 10. She was 2. So I ended up adopting a daughter the same age and age frame as I was.
Mm-hmm.
Did not know that. Mm-hmm. Had no clue about that. So I'm raising a toddler, a 2-year-old, and now we have a 10-year-old who has a lot of issues, a lot of trauma in his life because he was raised with his mother. He had seen his father murdered. He had seen a lot of things that I was not equipped to deal with. And that adoption was not going well because he was running away back to mom more than staying with us.
Mm-hmm. So
we were dealing with that. My mother was very critical of the whole process. She did not.
Wait a minute.
She objected to us adopting. She thought it was ludicrous. We didn't need to do that. She made us feel like it was the dumbest idea in the world to be adopting 2 children.
I feel like she... Okay.
Go figure.
Journey on. So you need a pie, what they good? Oh yeah, what is the one? Adoption.